Admiral, congratulations. Absolutely. Got to be monumental to be able to take the reins. And so I congratulate you on that. I want to talk a little bit about the Coast Guard's operations in the state of Florida. Probably no surprise, I'm a representative of the state of Florida. Seen a number of different attempts to enter our waters and then ultimately make their way to shore. Individuals coming from Haiti, individuals coming from the Bahamas, oftentimes to their own deaths as they capsize their vessels, things like that, miles and miles offshore. But I just wanted to walk through that a little bit, have some conversation about your layer, where that layers with state law enforcement, with local law enforcement, how everything is working together. Are there technologies that we need to bring to bear? Are there threats that you're seeing? Just today, the news has been paying attention to the drone strike that Ukraine conducted against Russia 1,000 miles inland. But, what are you doing to deal with threats as it relates to, drones powered by AI to identify specific vessels or individuals in uniforms, things like that? Just want to have a conversation about these things and see where you land on the vulnerabilities and what we're doing about them.
Well, Congressman, on the southern border where the president's declared a national emergency, in the Coast Guard, we view that as a system. So most people think, of course, of the southwest border, including the maritime portions. But for us, that's also the southeast maritime border, approaching the state of Florida and also our territories in the Caribbean. From threats of migration, illegal migration from Haiti and Cuba and the Bahamas, as you said, as well as movement of drugs and other threats. And so that is just as high a priority and part of we view as our response to that presidential national emergency. As you know, sir, that's under the leadership and command of Admiral Doug Schofield in the 7th District, along with Admiral Nate Moore in Atlantic area. And so that remains a high priority. In terms of the collaboration with other federal agencies and the state and local, it is probably the gold standard of cooperation that I've seen across the Coast Guard. Though we work hand in hand with federal, state, and local and county law enforcement to address the range of threats that are approaching by sea, and we do that successfully. Sir, you asked about the concerns about counter-UAS or UAS threat, and we're also concerned about that. We have a mobile deployable capability in our maritime security response teams, one on the west and the east coast. And then we have 2 fixed systems, one installed on a fast response cutter in New England, the other in Southern California, to address counter-UAS threats. But that's not enough capacity. My concern is we've got to scale, and we've got to scale fast to address the kind of evolving dynamic threat that we've seen that was reflected, as you said, sir, in the dynamic strike that we've seen news reports of in Ukraine, from Ukraine into Russia.
Very good. As you look at that, I've got to know a lot of my Coasties over the years. I live in Fort Pierce. We have a small Coast Guard station in Fort Pierce there. Great individuals, and so I would just take that opportunity to thank them for their service as my neighbors, friends and neighbors that have worked there. To move a little bit more specifically to some of those threat profiles, what's the greater threat profile going on right now, given, I don't want to say change in operations since the change of presidency, but the change in the way those operations are being enforced? You have the same core mission sets that you had them, but new president, new way of operating. So has the threat profile changed in terms of individuals attempting to come across our borders and the volume of people coming across our borders? Has that volume changed?
Well, in some ways it's changed, Congressman. So we've seen a drop in attempted illegal maritime migration from Cuba and Haiti. But the conditions inside those countries that would drive migration have not changed. So our strong enforcement presence is keeping that pressure for attempted movement of illegal migration into the U.S., particularly South Florida, that's keeping that at bay.
And any change or not change with the threat profile for drugs?
We still are concerned about the movement of drugs toward Florida and the rest of the southern border, sir. There is record cocaine production in Central and South America. And so as we ratchet down pressure on certain parts of the southern border, like the land portion, we expect to see and have seen increased movement and pressure by those cartels to try and move drugs and people by maritime means. And so that's why our increased presence off of California and then off of Texas and the Gulf of America is so critical to addressing and making sure that those cartels are not successful in moving those threats along the maritime side.
Okay, well, thank you, Admiral. I appreciate it. Chairman, thank you for the time.